But that's not the story I really want to tell. What I really want to tell is the reverberating impact of that loss, right? I want to talk about how that affected me and his children. I want to also talk about the silencing, because people know who did it, Dr. G. They know it, and they want to tell the story, but they can't snitch. And them not snitching is actually contributing to the hurt. They need to tell the story, they need to testify and name it, but they don't want to do it. That's the story I want to tell. And so violence in this sense, right, it's not always a single act, right? It has an impact that reverberates through our communities, through our minds, our hearts, and our spirits. And that if we only look at violence as a single act, we miss most of the story. This urban trifecta that I talk about, jobs, loss of jobs, the influx of crack cocaine, and the presence of violence, has become toxic to our well-being. We live as a result of this urban trifecta in a socially toxic community. What do I mean by socially toxic? We know about physical toxins. You know, if you've been exposed to lead paint and asbestos, right, and uranium, that these are physical things you can see and touch, that if you're exposed to them over a period of time, eventually you'll get sick, man, right? And if you're exposed to them even a longer time and don't deal with your illness, that those physical toxins can become lethal. They'll kill you. Well, research has shown that just like there are physical toxins in our community, that there's also social toxins in our community. And that those social toxins are most acute in black urban neighborhoods. Now, what are social toxins? Social toxins are things like fear, anxiety, racism, hopelessness, powerlessness. All these things create a sense that people cannot change. So the social toxins are present all the time, and we are all exposed to them. There was a study done around social toxins, and what this particular researcher wanted to do, what is the sound of sirens? How does sirens impact our sense of health and well-being? Now, I don't know if y'all remember this, but I remember we used to call it the ghetto bird. Right? The helicopter, right? Right? She did studies about hearing the helicopter and seeing the street, the spotlight, right? Come through my backyard. Where is he? Is somebody coming? Right? All of these things, right? That become normalized. That shouldn't be normal. Everybody doesn't experience that. That is not a normal way to live. And so this social toxicity that is in our environment, we need to first call it what it is. It is historical, beginning with our removal from off the continent of Africa. It is present in our forms of public policy. Jim Crow. We're entering a new Jim Crow era, y'all. Right? We're entering a new Jim Crow era. All of these policies, all of these practices have become toxic to our health and well-being. And so I told my mom, I said, Mom, I'm writing a book. It's called Black Youth Rising, but I'm dealing with this term called radical healing. And she said, baby, I like the term radical healing, but what are we healing from? And so that really pushed me to begin to think about, if we're healing, what is it we're healing from? And I think Cornel West says it in a book called Restoring Hope. He says, there is no political cure for an existential problem. That the problem isn't politics. The problem isn't our power to make change. The challenge isn't the curriculum in the schools, the principals and the teachers. The problem is a problem of meaninglessness, or a problem of meaningfulness and hope. And so if we are talking about what I call radical healing is a process and a strategy for us to detoxify our bodies and our communities. There are 4 steps to radical healing. And what radical healing provides us is with a sense of purpose and a sense of hope and a sense of joy and a sense of possibility and a sense of imagination, right? That what social toxicity has done has really threatened our capacity to even imagine what our communities should be. Y'all didn't hear me, right? I said that it's threatened our capacity to even imagine what our communities should be. And so it is that sense of imagination that has got us out of slavery. It's that sense of seeing the world that does not yet exist that created the Black Panther Party in this very city. Right? That social toxicity has a threat to our capacity to see the world in a different way. And so the radical healing process fosters that sense of imagination, that healing process, so that we can engage our lives, our communities, our families, our children in ways that transcend the conditions that we live in. And I always say that sometimes when we talk about violence, and I've been saying this over and over again, that we look for violence reduction strategies, that we want to prevent violence, we want to reduce violence. And I say, what such a low bar that is. That if we just aim for reducing violence, guess what? It's still violence. And what we need to be aiming for is a sense of thriving. People in Walnut Creek and Los Gatos and other communities that are wealthy don't just talk about lowering violence. They ask questions about what does it take in this neighborhood for my babies to thrive? What kinds of teachers do we need? What types of public policy do we need? What types of strategies do we need in community organizations to thrive? And so I think we need to ask that same question. That we need to not even use the term violence prevention, but we need to use terms like peace creation. We need to use things that foster our sense of peace and wellness and imagination. So what would it look like if we began to redefine the term violence prevention to peace creation? What does a peaceful neighborhood look like? Can we measure it? Can we document it? Can we measure levels of hope? Can we measure levels of well-being in a neighborhood? Simple things like this. I was in Harlem, New York. Actually, I was giving a talk last month to the Center for Disease Control. The Center for Disease Control is interested in this notion of radical healing because they know that violence prevention and these things, while they produce results, are not getting at the core issue. So I was telling them that, well, what would it look like? What is an indicator for those of y'all who need to measure, which I don't think we always need? What is an indicator of a neighborhood, a peaceful neighborhood? In Harlem, New York, Jeffrey Kennedy says, well, we just need to have more block parties. We need to bring people out of their houses onto the street. Because fear, anxiety, and worry have made people go inside.